because I'm going back. I'm going back in '86, and I'm going to land in Nairobi in this episode. Got my reading glasses. Excuse me. I asked somebody on YouTube recently, Mr. Mayo's movies, whether he's looking for infamy with these videos, and he just laughed. So maybe that's what my videos are about, an effort to put in perpetuity some of my memories. I've got my little diary here, so you might remember bitterly disappointed that I couldn't go overland when I got down to Aswan, that I got cold feet and I turned back. In the last couple of weeks, or the last week at least, I've been thinking I could do it now, I reckon. Like, I'm nearly 64, but I reckon if I bought a motorbike, if I had 50 or 60,000, going on the success of last year's South African holiday, if I had 50 or 60,000, I'd buy a really nice motocross bike, maybe in Germany or something, and I'd ship it over to Egypt, and I'd ride a bike down, and then when I get down to South Africa, I'd ship it back to Australia. It ain't going to happen, but nice to dream, isn't it? So, and you got to remember that when I turn back as well, I'm going to get a few cars come past. I've already been travelling 4 months, so anyway, we pick up the story on the 22nd of February 1987. Within a few days, I write from an entirely new city and country, Nairobi. I've only been here an hour, but its similarity in feel to Bulawayo is close. That's in Zimbabwe. I took the train up to Cairo, got up early, took $5 out and goddamn bought a ticket on the spot to Harare with a 2-day stop over here. I feel now it's a good idea because I feel really happy now. In Aswan I was miserable. The flight last night was good, not too long to wait. The flight was 2:15 a.m. I got to the airport about midnight, got rid of some of my pounds on Egyptian junk, I've called it, probably bracelets and that, and I've written for Amina. She was my girlfriend in Zimbabwe at the time. I wanted to buy scotch for Dad, but the bastards expected US dollars. The plane was mostly empty, and I got into listening to my Walkman and writing postcards. I slept a little. I spent the last night in Cairo with Farid, an assorted family, a real laugh. I was cracking jokes about at a furious rate. Although officially I'm here 2 days, I'll ask tomorrow if I can make it a few weeks to see the Gorrillas in Kilimanjaro. Time will tell. The hotel I booked into was full, so I sleep on the roof. Tonight could be fun or hell, we'll see. So what happened, I get to Nairobi, and it was just like, as I said, Bulawayo, big wide pavements, colonial sort of buildings to keep the sun out, and verandas, and that real feel about colonial Africa, and the Tusker beer. And as I said in the last episode, I wanted to see Kenya. I was really after that film Out of Africa. So I got to the hotel, and as I've written, it was full downstairs. So I went up onto the roof, and the roof had sort of concrete walls along the side of it, quite a big expanse, as I remember. And there was all these cardboard boxes flat laying on the rooftop. So I got some cardboard boxes and I lay them on the side of the brick wall going along the edge of the roof, and I was able to make myself a little humpy. It was quite cool, you know. And I put my sleeping bag in there. I wasn't sat down long when this guy from Germany or something came over and got talking to me. He rolled a joint, and that was my settling into Nairobi. I've mentioned about going to see the Gorrillas and Mount Kilimanjaro. It turned out I never went to Kilimanjaro. It was 150 US dollars to get into the park, and I thought that was a bit too much, but in hindsight as well, I don't think I was fit enough to do it, but I was fit enough to go to the Gorillas. So the Gorillas, earlier in 1983, when I'd been back to South Africa with Tom, we stayed at a place called the Allandine in Hillbrow in Johannesburg. That was before we got our individual jobs. And at this Allandine hotel, there were a lot of backpackers and travellers, and I always remembered there was this couple that were there, and they were talking about seeing gorillas in Zaire. And that's what put the idea in my head to go and see the gorillas. It says here I went out. So on the 25th, that's 3 days later. So much to report, may take 2 entries. Firstly, my ticket to Harare has been delayed, so I can stay here a few weeks. To that end, I applied for a visa to Zaire. I hope it will be today, so I'll get a train to Kisumu near the Uganda border, and I hope Hike will take buses to Goma in Zaire. It should be good. Second, I had my hair done here, Rasta style. They put beads in it. I don't know what Dad will say. I hope I don't get hassled at customs either. It looks, I think, quite good, but I'll see how long the novelty lasts. Yeah, I still had the card for that. The hairdressers, when these girls, they braided my hair and put beads in it, like Stevie Wonder, Hotter Than July. And also, I don't know if we haven't met her yet, but I started putting photos into this photo development shop, and I noticed that the young girls in there were always giggling and laughing when I went in, and sending this girl over to serve me. It was obvious that she was keen on me. Her name was Whiskey. I'll see if I can find a photo of her. She was a lovely woman, and kept in contact even years later, ringing me from Kenya. But we'll find out a bit more about Whiskey. But yeah, whenever I went in the shop to pick up photos or drop them off, they'd all giggle and say, Whiskey, Whiskey, your customer's here. So I've said that I went out with a German guy last night. We went to a club. It was just like Bulawayo or any other African city club. This tall Maasai girl approached me and requested beer, of course. I bought her a few, but danced and talked to her for hours. The bad news, the band was from Zaire, and I was getting into them. At the end of the night, I went to her place, and she tried everything to get me into her bed, but although she was getting me really horny, I escaped. The door was locked, so I climbed onto the roof, ninja style, then down some ladders. Excellent escape. I don't have any memory of that at all. So on the 27th of February, I left Nairobi on the Wednesday night and basically travelled 2 days straight. The train took me from Nairobi to Kisumu, then I took a taxi to Busia on the Ugandan border. I walked for a few kilometres at this stage. I stopped schoolyard within minutes. I think they must have been 200 kids, were pushing them back with big sticks. I went to take a photo and the kids went crazy, surging forward, so my guards were pushed right back, and there was fear I would be attacked, so I retreated. I got a lift with a truck that took more taxis to Kampala. I checked 3 hotels, all full, then really enjoyed a pineapple. I went to the station. There was a train to Kasiri ready to go. I could only get 3rd class, so took it, and what a ride, packed with bodies all night. I tried sleeping on various angles on the floor. We were stopped and searched various times, at one stage for 2 hours before reaching the town, about 1 p.m. today. The heat is stifling. I checked the fees for climbing Ruwonzori mountains from here, but too much on my own. I hope to go to Zaire tomorrow to tackle the gorillas. So what I'm getting at there, as I remember, I got into Uganda, and I only remember with Kampala, as I mentioned, and they had got this huge pineapple. It was so juicy and so sweet. I must have had like a pocket knife or something in my backpack. The backpack was so heavy. It felt like 20 kilos on my back all the time. It was so heavy. My shoulders were killing me. As I mentioned in there, wherever you walked along there, you're prone to be mobbed by curious Africans, especially the kids. So they saw you traipsing along and they'd yell out, and they would come surging out. Like in this instance, I'm mentioning a school, and they'd surround you and they'd be yelling, where you from, asking for stuff. But not over the top, not pushy like the Egyptians, just curious Africans. And yes, I don't remember much about Kampala, just this huge big square in the centre where there was taxis everywhere. And I remember going into a businessman's office block. I needed to change some money. I don't know how I knew about him. Probably someone in the square said, "Do you want to change money?" And I would have said, "Yeah." I used to keep money in my camera bag, hidden away. So I went up into this businessman's office. I had US American dollars. I might have even had American $100 notes, which is what they wanted. And he changed it into Ugandan shillings, I think they used. And I know I ended up with piles of money that I was stuffing into my bag. Like I could have filled a suitcase with local currency. So yeah, as I said, I got this train to the border through Uganda to the border of Zaire. And on that train, I mentioned that I was in third class and it was packed. Yeah, I remember sitting on the floor near the door and talking to this Ugandan guy, and these army guys got on and they started yelling at him in Ugandan or whatever they were talking, but they started getting heavy with him, like they were suspecting him of wanting to rob me, or what was he telling me, was he divulging state secrets to me or something. They didn't like him being pally with me, and they were jabbing him in the ribs with truncheons and that, you know, they had bloody AK-47s on. We got over the border into Zaire, and it was another long bloody walk. So yeah, where I was heading for was the Ruwonzori mountains, where the gorillas, where you could go and see them. And there was a mission station run by these Belgians, I think they were, or French monks. We'll see if that's in here. I left Kasisi by taxi on the 28th, so that we're now into March, 4th of March, and got to the Ugandan border easily. Then I got a lift to the Zaire border with a Ugandan truck driver. Oh yeah, I forgot about these guys. This was when the waiting began. The trucks had to be cleared by customs, who were expecting to be bribed. So from Saturday morning till Tuesday morning, I sat with these Ugandan drivers. They fed me, gave me a place to sleep on bags of salt in a truck, but more importantly kept me amused. Names like Shorty, Monday, Livingston and Cylinder Head will always make me smile. I could wait no longer for them, so I set off yesterday paying 100 Zaire for a lift to Benin. This took hours. Yeah, I'd forgotten about those truck drivers, and I wouldn't have mentioned them if I hadn't seen that. That was a lot of fun. So from Saturday till Tuesday I hung out with these guys. Yeah, there was about half a dozen of them. And yeah, they had crazy names. One was called Cylinder Head. And they wanted to know why I was going to, what was my interest in going across to Zaire to see these gorillas. So I was making signs and saying that I'm looking for a gorilla lady, that I wanted to marry a gorilla lady. And they were shaking their heads and going, no, there's ladies here. You don't go for gorilla. I'm going, no, I like the gorilla. And just making them laugh and eating with them, you know, reminded me of the days back in the bakery when I was a kid and hanging out with the African workers and eating with them and staying around, sitting around the fire with them and talking. And yeah, what happened was, one morning, like I used to sleep on the ground. I said in here I slept on the salt bags. I don't remember that, but I did One morning I was sleeping on the ground in my sleeping bag when I heard like yelling, and I heard a bugle going, and I opened one eye. I saw these soldiers raising the Zaire flag, and I kept sleeping, you know, and these guys come stomping over with their army boots, and they started jabbing me with their rifle butts, you know. They wanted me to get up out of my sleeping bag and salute the flag. I remember the truck drivers came running over. They were yelling at them, saying, you know, I think they were trying to protect me. But yeah, that was kind of, and when you looked at the flag, it was all torn and tatty anyway. But yeah, so I got up and I did this exaggerated salute of their flag, and they all laughed and smiled and marched back to their posts. So this lift I took through some thick bush and a terrible pothole road. I was in the back sharing with Africans and chickens. In Benin, I ate 3 donuts of a sort, then got a truck to Butembo. This took approximately 6 hours, but they stopped a lot. I came into the first hotel they dropped me at. No power, toilets, just gross, and I think a brothel. But I slept well, so today I must tackle the long haul down to Rutshuru. That's where the guerrillas lay. P.S. Only note of interest in the border weight was being called up in front of 20 soldiers for not saluting their flag. Yeah, that's the incident. So the next day, we've left Butembo to attempt the haul to Rutshuru after walking 20 kilometres. Fuck, with that bag on my shoulders. And it was getting increasingly like there were rivers that were raging next to me, and vines and creepers and thick bush jungle, you know. It was becoming Tarzan country. In the heat of the equator, that's right. Back on the equator. I must have been fit. Passing numerous villages and many bovines, that's cows. I got a lift on a truck for 500 something. It must have cost me 500 Zaire, and I think they were pounds maybe. There were 2 New Zealanders on, so I didn't feel too alone, and a chance to talk proper English. I've had little to eat apart from pineapples and bananas for the past 3 days, although tonight I had some tinned fish and bread. The truck journey was long and rough. I stood all the way. We got to the village at about 11:30, and I shared a room with the Mzongos. That must be the African word for white people, but they were New Zealanders. I remember the guy now. They gave me some hot rice. It tasted divine. Today we continued our journey through the Virunga Game Park, and it was great. We saw a pride of lion, a lot of hippo, monkeys, and a good spectacular view. Now I sit outside a Catholic mission in Rutshuru. The town is small and no bank. I'm short of Zaires. I don't know if I can climb the volcano tomorrow. Sunburnt and absolutely filthy. I feel very wasted and went into the church to hear the children sing and to get strength. I discovered today I've been an hour out in time for a week, and it never made a difference. So the next day, the 8th, was Dad's birthday, and I didn't send him a card or contact him. I'm staying at the Catholic mission in Jumba this time. I got strength after my last entry and managed to change some money, so I walked from Rutshuru to Jumba. 28 kilometres. Bloody hell. Then the further 2 to the mission, but as you're going to find out, I needed that fitness to get to the guerrillas. I just found to the mission here, I've found just excellent food, my first hot food in a week, a good bed and a relaxing feel to sit and watch rain fall whilst listening to classical music is great. There is a guerrilla sanctuary here 8 kilometres from the mission. I walked up early yesterday but was unlucky, couldn't quite fit in. I'm booked for tomorrow, so it may happen at last. My lack of a map has meant I've been misinformed. I didn't need to go to Goma to leave Zaire. In fact, I would need a Rwanda transit visa to do so now. There's a Ugandan border 15 kilometres from here. An Australian told me I will need 4 days to walk to the next town in Uganda. My feet were blistered as is. With this in mind, I don't want to back down the road to hike to Goma to see the volcano, then come back, so I'll try and leave after the guerrillas. So yeah, it's starting to come back now, the order of things. Something I wanted to mention. let's go back to Nairobi for a moment, and we'll go back to the rooftop where I was sleeping under the boxes. Must have been there a few nights. The reason I want to put this in context, I met this Danish doctor. Her and her girlfriend were in the hotel in one of the rooms, and I got talking to them. Once again, I don't want to come across as some Casanova, but when you're travelling, all things are possible. So I got talking to this. Her name was Ula, and actually I've seen Ula on Facebook. I didn't contact her, but I found her on Facebook. So she came up to that my little humpy a few times. She lay in under the roof of my cardboard box a couple of times, and we shared a mango. I remember there was one night she'd been out and someone had stolen her watch in Nairobi. She was very upset. She came up to the rooftop to find me, and she lay with me. So I asked her to go to the Gorillas with me, but she was with a girlfriend. As often happens, one of them was fat. So she was stuck with the fat girlfriend, and she couldn't leave her alone. So, but I know she wanted to come and see the Gorillas with me. So it was a shame that I never got to travel with her. Still got her address written in the back of this book, Ula. Anyway, let's go back to the Gorilla Sanctuary. So on the 10th of the 3rd, 1987, I got yesterday must stand out as one of the best, worst days of this stage of travel. We left the mission early, about 6 a.m, and we walked fairly quickly to the gorilla hut, sweating and panting. I had my pack on. I was travelling with this New Zealand guy. He spoke French. Most of them, yeah, they all spoke French. At the mission, staying with the monks, they all spoke French. I remember sitting at the table with them and having hot food and having a proper bed to sleep in. It was heaven, you know, and I just can't believe the kilometres that I clocked up walking with that backpack. So I made it to the hut about 8 a.m, and we had to wait till 10 a.m. before leaving to view the apes. After a walk through thick forest, we found them, but rain pissed down on us and the gorillas didn't like the rain much. We stood wet and miserable for near on an hour and started contemplating turning back, but then it cleared and tropical sunshine prevailed, and the huge hairy beasts laid around the bush, lapping up the sun. I don't think I'm doing it justice. It was a bloody long walk. I thought from the mission station to where the gorillas were, we were quite close, but it wasn't. It was a long walk, or 8 a.m. till I reckon about midday. It was about 4 hours of walking like through jungle. But yeah, when the sun came out, they were all laying back sunbaking, and one of them, he was like a silverback. He was the head of the clan. I remember he was quite irritable because he was looking after one of the kids. He'd injured his hand or something, so he was quite irritable. And they know you're there watching them, but as long as you don't get too close, they don't approach you. Oh, they didn't approach us anyway. But yeah, it was all going to turn to shit if the rain had kept up. But the rain stopped. We hung around an hour. Then the sun came out, and I took some photos, which I'll show you, of the gorillas. Alright, so you can see there, it's a bit dark because it's taken from slide, but that's a raving river, or raging river, with thick undergrowth there. And that was the sort of terrain I was walking through on the way to get to Ruwonzori for these gorillas. There's one of them. Thick green foliage, and she's quite wet, or he's quite wet because of the rain I described. There's another shot of one of them, and there's another of those raging rivers with the vines hanging down and the thick jungle. That's quite a good photo. The youngster and maybe the mum with their back to us, but they were climbing these trees, swinging around, the noise of the crashing of them as they frolicked in. She's checking her nails. There's probably a sibling. That's a mother there with the baby. Some old stamps from Burundi or Rwanda. So yeah, that's my time with the gorillas. So we viewed them quite well now and watched as the youngsters played with the chief. Marcel was he. We, two Aussies from Moonee Ponds, had decided to walk. Yes, I met these Aussies. They decided to walk from the sanctuary to the Ugandan border using a guide and taking tracks. We left after another bout of heavy rain, about 3 p.m, and then walked solidly till we reached the border, crossing rivers, fields, villages. It compared to summer history's great marches. We arrived at the border of Zaire just on closing time and got through easily. I bought some samosas, ate 4 fairly quickly, drank a bottle of Primus, which was a long neck of beer, and then wow, I was so sick I threw up for hours. We managed to get a lift to Kasori to take a hotel. Yeah, like I don't know if it's the same day after the Gorrillas or the day or so after. I can't imagine after the Gorrillas I walked straight away, but within a day or so I met these two Aussies. I don't know if they'd been to see the Gorrillas. I think I met them on the back of a truck or something. So they said that we could get to the Ugandan border by going overland. There was this kid that took us this kid knew the shortcut to get to the border, so we followed him. And as we were walking through villages, that uphill, down dale, through villages, there were huts with people cooking and pounding grain and all that, just like that time back in Swaziland, walking through their villages and saying hello. And I remember I was picking these green beans off the vines and eating these beans as I walked. I don't know if that's what made me sick. Reading now, maybe it was probably the samosas, but we walked for hours and hours to get to that border, and we got through the Zairean border. I drank the bottle of, which would have been lukewarm Zairean beer and some samosas, and it was probably the samosas, I suppose. But yeah, I got violently ill, and thank goodness for those Ugandans, thank goodness for those two Aussies from Moonee Ponds, because they helped me into the hotel. As I said, I was violently ill. And for once, this wasn't me doing something stupid and drinking cough medicine. As I remember, we got up in the morning and we started hitchhiking, but they were going a different way from me, so they got a lift, and I don't think I ever saw them again. So, yeah, 3 days later, I'm in Kampala. I make this an emotional entry. I've spent 9,700 shillings talking to Diane. That was this girl that I was in love with, a Greek girl. So I won't go too much in about what we spoke about, but you know, that was the thing with me. I couldn't enjoy myself because I was always, not always, but I was missing this girl. I was in love with this girl, and it was never going to happen. I look back now and say, you know, yes, we were young, we were in love. It was fantastic. But we were just unsuited to each other. We were from very different backgrounds. And even today, you know, I hear from her every now and then. She rang me when I was in Mafeking, or I rang her. We talked on WhatsApp for about an hour when I was in South Africa last year. And, you know, we both got great memories of, we were young and we were really in love, but it just wasn't meant to be. But yeah, I was spending up money on these bloody overseas phone calls, because remember, you couldn't just, it was real hard to make an overseas phone call. You had to book time at a post office or something. So I'm in that dilemma I've often faced. I don't know whether to go up to Masindi or not to go to the park, Murchison Falls. I'm in Uganda, right? So the idea of the bus trip is not appealing. Plus, I could get there and have no way of getting around, but still, the idea of walking through the park appeals to me. The last 2 days here have not been anything special. I've eaten lots of food I've missed. So I've got to know Phil and Tony quite well. So actually, yeah, they're the people from Moonee Ponds. It looks like they didn't part ways with me the next day, as I sort of remembered. So we had much trouble getting a room. It's a nightmare, but we were lucky again and got into the Trust Inn. I rang my sister. Not a good call. I didn't have much to say, but it seems my money is through for me in Nairobi, and also that Jack is running up a bill for parking fines for me. I left him my car. Jack lived opposite me in Gardenvale, and I mentioned we were on top of the bank. He lived behind me diagonally behind the newsagents. He was an alcoholic and he didn't have long to live actually, but I lent him my car, which was absolutely insane. And yeah, I wasn't impressed when I got back, but anyway, let's not go into that. I tried Gerald, but she wasn't at home. Gerald was the Nicaraguan girl from Los Angeles. I left feeling a bit down, so who do I try? Pauline Reynolds. I mean, all this money I was spending on these overseas phone calls, just because I was homesick, I suppose. And always, she lifted me. She made me feel good, and I love her for that. She was another girl I went out with for a while. Phil and Tony leave today, so once again I'm alone, but I'll survive. Okay. So what happened was, and I'll show you as well, the Ugandan Tourist Association plaque. So, I don't know, there was like a place called Murchison Falls in Uganda, and you could, there was a set of, falls. There was waterfalls. Made my way to this game park because, you know, I'd been to so many game parks when I was staying with Dad and all that. But I didn't have a car of my own, so I was relying on lifts, hitchhiking. And I got to this hotel and it was completely stripped. It had been a tourist hotel at some stage, but tourists had stopped coming to Uganda. You know, this was only a few years after Idi Amin. I remember asking the locals about Idi Amin. So, ended up, you know, when I got to this hotel, they showed me this room. It had no beds. Everything had been stripped, but that didn't bother me. So I just put I had this rubber mat that I used to roll out. It was on my backpack, and then on top of the rubber mat, I'd put my sleeping bag. And that's how I slept. I slept in this room on the floor, and at some stage I was wandering around, and in the reception area was this metal plaque for the Ugandan Tourist Association. So I had this knife. I was trying to unscrew it. I managed to unscrew three of the three screws on it, but they always had that fourth one, which was a bastard. I couldn't get the fourth one, and I'm busy trying to get this thing off the wall when I turn around, and there's this. He was like a janitor or a night watchman or something, and he's standing me watching me trying to get this thing off the wall. So I acted like I wasn't doing anything, and I just walked away from it. But that night I went back and I had to actually pull it off the wall. You can see where it's bent in the corner. I've got it inside. I'll show you later. Yeah, this is it here. Turn the light on. Might help. You can see there. That's the one that wouldn't come off. That's the Uganda Tourist Associate member. But yeah, I walked around a bit. You could, you know, without a car, I couldn't see the animals. I did see an elephant by the side of the road. I approached them with a banana, I think, which was kind of mad. So I've written Para Lodge. I have a double room, bathroom, shower and bath, all for 40 cents a night. A view overlooking the Nile, and at night I hear hippos barking. Problem is the rooms are stripped. The beds and fittings have all been removed. Yeah, that's right. So you could sit on the balcony and you could see down to the Nile and you could hear the hippos. They make a sound like an old group of gentlemen chuckling away, having cigars and cracking jokes. That's what they sound like. There was an old waiter called Christopher who must remember the days when this place bustled with tourists and safaris. He took such effort into fetching me water, drinks and checking I was all right. I walked into the old restaurant, bar and reception areas. It must have really been something in its day. I managed to meet a friend on the bus to Masindi. Actually, I'd given up coming here. I was walking to go to Jinja, but these guys helped me get a ticket and seat on the bus. It wasn't a bad trip. I stayed with these Christians overnight in Masindi's, and they helped me get a truck up to the park. I walked a few kilometres into the park and just at dusk saw 3 young elephant next to the road, so took some good shots. Today I tried to organise someone to take me to the falls, but I first had to get permission from the army to have a soldier with me, then had to get permission from the game warden in Kampala. Then I'm told it's a 21-mile walk, so I tried. So I never got to see the Murchison Falls. Christopher must have been the guy that came across me trying to steal his plaque. So look, the next entry is I'm back in, we'll go on a little more, okay? So back in my old haunt, the Kenyatta, that must have been where I stayed in Uganda, in Kampala. Wimpy, I've just written about 6 postcards, although why I bother is beyond me. Yeah, the only person who writes is Pauline Reynolds. I got back from Uganda at 6 a.m. yesterday. I left Masindi at 6:30 a.m, arrived in Kampala, and at 1 p.m. got a taxi to Jinja at 3:30 p.m, then a taxi to Busia. The reason I went to Jinja was that Dad always talked about the source of the Nile, and at Jinja, which is a town, I don't know if it's in Uganda or somewhere around there, is claiming to be the source of the Nile. Actually, that's not true. The Nile starts in the mountains of Ethiopia, but yeah, I don't know, Jinja has a reputation, so I wanted to see that for Dad's sake. Then a taxi to Busia for 5:30 p.m. Here I've met a German girl and we got stoned and got on the bus together. It was a real laugh. I was so out of it. It seemed so bizarre being in Africa while stoned. Everything cracked me up. Now I'm back in the Kenya Lodge on the roof. I bought Mango's dope, writing paper and some coke, so it's going to be fun. Also got